Hi guys, it's Marc Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Marc Zicree of Space Command. And the the other night I was on Coast to Coast for 2 hours with my dear friend George Noory, talking Star Trek, and it was the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, and it was great fun. We had open phones, and I was talking all about my history of uh, Star Trek, all the way from being on the set when I was a kid for Christmas on the set of Turnabout Intruder to co-writing and directing and producing World Enough in Time and coming up with Far Beyond the Stars and all the stuff. But as a result of this, a number of new subscribers have joined Mr. Sci-Fi. So I just wanted to take a minute to talk a little bit about who I am, what I do, and also more specifically for those of you who might want careers as screenwriters or TV writers or producers or directors or novelists, to let you know a little bit about what I can do that might be of use to you. So first off, many of you know that I've been a professional writer for over 40 years. I sold my first short story at 19. I was writing my first book, The Twilight Zone Companion, at 22, and by the time I was 22 or 23, I was writing for TV. So I started in animation. My friend Michael Reeves brought me into animation, so I was writing for Smurfs and He-Man and Super Friends and Real Ghostbusters and dozens of shows, and then jumped over to live action and was writing Babylon 5 and Star Trek The Next Generation and Sliders, Deep Space Nine, Friday the 13th, the series, on and on. I've written for most of the major studios and networks. And and during that time I was also writing books and so forth. So one of the things I did was about 23 years ago, my friends in Hollywood were feeling very bummed out and isolated, which can happen here. And so I started a round table of writers and directors and actors and producers, and it grew. And now it's thousands of people, and there's offshoots all over the country. And we meet every Thursday here in LA. And it's quite fun and really wonderful, and it's a huge community and supportive, compassionate resource for people, which is exactly what I wanted it to be. But through that process of running the table, which was always free except for people ordering food, because we hold it at a restaurant, some of the attendees wanted me to mentor them more hands-on. And so Elaine and I started a class where we mentor writers and directors and actors and producers for 6 weeks, both here in LA and long distance via Skype and Google Hangouts and so forth, and sort of guide them and just say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? What's stopping you? Here's some suggestions. Here's some things you can do. Very hands-on. Sometimes we'll bring in friends of ours who run network shows or write big movies or star in big TV shows, and they'll advise our students as well. And additionally, beyond that, we can be hired to consult, and we can, depending on our schedules, be hired to read screenplays and teleplays and give notes. So if you're interested in any of that, you can go on my website, marczicree.com, and click through to Super Mentors and find out all about that. And feel free to email me or call me at 323-363-1259 with any questions. I'm happy to tell you more about it. And beyond that, there's a number of videos online I just found out about where I advise on how to pitch and things like that. I found out that my video on how to pitch is the number 4 video on the subject on Google, which is nice. It's nice because I like the fact that that people can actually find accurate information rather than misinformation. One thing I will advise for those of you who do want careers is always try to learn from people who have successfully done what you were trying to do. Because if you notice, many of the ads, be discerning, because many of the ads on screenwriting and so forth, look at the credentials of the people who are teaching it. I'm surprised because I'll get these emails, and often there's no credentials. The people have no background. They're teaching something and they don't know what they're talking about. So just be aware of snake oil. That's the one thing I'll mention. Just be careful of that. Be discerning. So because when I was starting out, as I've mentioned, my heroes were the writers of Twilight Zone and Star Trek and Outer Limits, and thanks to science fiction conventions I was able to meet them and learn from them, and it was invaluable. And I went to the Clarion Writers Workshop, which still exists, and it's the leading science fiction writing workshop in the country. So again, make sure you're learning from professionals. Make sure you're learning from those who know what they're talking about. Now, then beyond that, in terms of the Mr. Sci-Fi channel, the genesis of that was my friend Glenn Mazzaro, who ran The Walking Dead and Damien, and he was executive producer on The Shield. He said, "You're such an expert on sci-fi. Why don't you have your own channel?" So that's what I did.